Greetings, everyone. This is Virtuous Roots, where we reclaim virtue to bring it our home and yours. And I'm Thomas McCuddy.
And I'm Thomas Quackenbush.
I'm Nick Wiegand, and today's conversation is going to be on adaptability and kind of the virtue of failing gracefully. I think it's important to talk through this because I think in our current generation, many kids struggle really, really hard with any type of failure, let alone the idea of failing gracefully. So if you could begin us by just kind of talking through the idea of adaptability, and then we can figure out how to apply it to our families and children and probably our own lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's one of the things that's gone on in our culture is the trying to protect kids from experiencing failure because it comes with negative emotions, and we start trying to connect that with, but then they have like mental health because they feel bad because they've done this. And I think it goes back to not having that adaptability. Like, they don't know how to regulate emotions. They don't know how to handle and again, because when you face a failure, whatever that is, you're going to have negative emotions. Like, it's going to make you feel bad. Hopefully you should.
Yeah, it's not fun.
Yeah, you should have some sort of regret to some sort of level that would be appropriate for what's happened. Like, if you lose a game, that's one thing. If you fail a class, I've as a professor, I know have students who have that happen, and it's one of those things. I don't like it, and I know they really don't like it, but it's one of those things that, well, now you're gonna have to work through that. You're gonna have to get past it. And I've even seen, we've got adults who, if they fail a class, they'll drop out. Like, they don't know how to handle, they don't know how to regulate, how to simply adapt and overcome. I made a mistake. Let me adjust. Let me fix what's gone wrong and go forth and overcome. And I think that's why we need to instill this in kids early and, not just, purposely set them up for failure. But I think it's also the kind of thing, I think Nick and I share an opinion where, like, when we're playing board games, like with kids, we don't let them win.
I don't let them win.
No, and I do this with my boys. I mean, I may not destroy them. I don't want to, devastate them. But there's an element. I'm not just going to let them win. I'm not going to try to pad. I might try something else, because I had to learn this with other people, that sometimes, because I've always loved strategy games, so I tend to have an advantage. So sometimes I'll try something different, and sometimes it doesn't work for me, and then they end up winning.
I'll play a little softer, but
yeah.
I definitely, we play a card game with our kids, and it's all friendly until they start talking smack, and then we just destroy them, and then they realize I don't let children win.
But it's from a place of, how's that going to help them? Yeah. How's that going to teach them? Like, that's why I would say, well, if I'm going to try something and maybe like take a risk and do something, and it doesn't work for me, they legitimately won that game, and they're going to learn from that.
Well, the counterpoint that they make is, well, it builds their self-esteem. Well, it builds their self-esteem until they find out that you always let them win, and then they realize you have to lie to him to do that.
Because the same thing happened to my son. Like, so he's really good at chess. He just has a mind that just can see moves, and I didn't let him beat me for, like, we play for real when we played, and I would beat him, and then eventually he actually beat me fair and square, where he can feel, like, walk away confident. I beat Dad, and I was like, good game, and let him recognize that he actually beat me as I'm trying, rather than I'm just letting him win the game. And I think you're absolutely right with that. If you really want to build self-esteem, actually overcoming an obstacle will build your self-esteem. Right. And one of the things that I recognize about this generation, or like basically our kids, like this kind of mixture of all the generations, all the letters or whatever. I grew up in the 80s and the 90s, and it seemed like the culture, like in terms of parenting, was a little bit more hands-off. For me, it was pretty much.
You mean back in the 1900s?
Yeah, back in the 1900s, back in those days.
You didn't have to do that.
But it was hands-off, and it seems like, when I remember just growing up and just having to figure things out on my own, like just figuring things out. Like, we got a computer in our house. Like, my parents didn't know anything about computers. I had to figure it out. Like, I had to like just learn. Where kids today, like they tend just to wait. And it seems like the parenting shifted from hands off to completely and utterly helicopter hands on parents, where they're not allowing their child to experience any sort of difficulty. They don't want them to feel any sort of adversity. So instead of them just working through a problem, even though we might have some failure, they tend to give up right away and just move it aside. Like, I just can't do that. And I'm like, well, you could if you just spend a little bit more time and just saying, at this moment, at this particular thing, I just need to accomplish it, and I'm not going to stop until I do. Because that's pretty much what I do. I work on my car, something new I haven't worked on before. I'm like, I'm not going to stop this until I figure out, because otherwise I won't be able to drive my car either. But the idea is that, like, I want this done, and I want to do it myself, and I'm going to figure it out.
So I'm going to read Romans 5:3-5. Reads, not only that, but we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character. And character produces hope, and hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit, who has been given to us. And so it's a biblical concept. It's an idea that and I say it a lot when I'm talking about Christianity, is that if someone has promised you that it's just going to be easy and good and everything gets better, they've lied to you.
Yep.
We're almost guaranteed suffering as Christians, right? And so how do we prepare these children to do that by fixing everything? Now, here's the deal. And so we, all the time when we get on our high horse, we say things like kids these days or now, right? But like, we produced them.
Yeah, I know the kids are.
I mean, our generation.
Children.
Like, you guys have got younger kids, but I mean, you guys started probably a little later than I did. I've got older kids. Like, we produce these kids that are producing these kids. Like, so we went from that the idea of being allowed to fail, to our generation saying, well, we were allowed to fail too much apparently, and so we're not going to allow our kids to do that.
Well, I think it was a little too hands off, and I think we knee jerked in the complete opposite, because like, we felt alienated and alone, and the culture shifted. Like, you think about the music and stuff that was it was very kind of ungodly. It's like this emergence of this kind of isolation. And for us, I remember just growing up, from my personal experience of going through a lot of depression, and just I wanted a little bit more interaction with my father, a little bit more interaction, just positive, like good interaction with my parents, where, maybe not be so hands off. Maybe I needed a little bit of, like, let me go out, a certain distance, but don't completely let me go. Like, just like, we use prudence. We don't just throw our kids to the wolves, but at the same time, just allow them to experience difficulty, but in basically in ways that they can understand and benefit from.
And what we're talking about is, again, and we keep going back to, virtue provides us this model where there's this middle ground that is ideal. And our Generation X or Xennial, because we're kind of at that cusp with the 80s, we were raised on neglect and sarcasm, basically. Like, that was...
I don't know. I felt like I loved my childhood. Like, I'm going to be honest.
There is, but I mean, there was, I think, in that generation, that's why it was too much hands off for a lot of people. That I think that's the predominant. That's why Generation X is what it is, because there was this mindset. So now with the Gen Xers, because of that, I think we often knee jerk, and that's where you get the helicoptering, because well, I was just left to my own. I'm going to be there for every little thing, and well, I mean, so now we have I think the Gen Xers produced this next generation, right? Who are becoming parents now, right? And they're the ones that are knee jerking even more, right? And so it's this.
Well, you got social media. You can't scroll through social media and there's like self-help after self-help and your psychological tests, this, that. It's like our culture's like this culture of therapeutic kind of just drivel, just kind of being thrown at us constantly. And we're thinking that everything we're doing is affecting our child in some way psychologically, and we're to blame for that. So there's a lot of guilt, and there's a lot of, it's just the inundation of all that information and all of the pseudo kind of science that's out there on social media that hasn't been vetted or scientifically kind of in the community of scientists actually doing the work of so we're just getting a lot of this information, and we're just what am I doing to my child if I'm because we have a newborn, and it seems like, you know, newborns have been around since human beings, you know, Cain was born back in the day. But it seems like it's been 8 years since we've had a baby, and it seems like it's like the babies have changed so much, and we have to do so much different things. And like, I'm like, what in the world? It's the same thing. It's like the baby hasn't like evolved into some, you know, like a different creature.
Well, I'm going to push back pretty hard on the idea that the pseudoscience we need to be listening to the scientists who are out there doing it, and so I'm going to push back really hard on that, because I feel like that is where a large portion of our culture has gone, and it's moved us into some serious mental health crisis because they're listening to that. Mm-hmm. I'm pushing back, and I know what you mean, but I want to make sure we say it the right way. Okay. I'm pushing back and saying, you know, we look at Scripture in the way that Scripture raises children, not the way either the pseudoscience, the pop science, or some of these psychological ideas that are out there now.
Because the basis, and that's what I mean. Like, all of it is just inundating, but I'm just saying that most of it's not even scientifically just backed at all. It's just kind of thrown out there. People just have ideas, and they just put it out there in a nice clean up meme.
I think, to put it this way, there's a lot of people out there who are trying to make money on a new niche idea.
Yeah,
sure.
And that's what we end up getting and experiencing. So I think this is why we need to think about, as parents, having that intentional, like, why are we doing these things? How are we? And I'll give concretes, like, because we just got back from a speech and debate tournament with my oldest, and my middle child stepped up and started doing some things. And I was there for awards, and my middle child didn't get anything. And he was just kind of like, you know, sort of, you know, he was down. He was like, I really thought I was going to place this time, because the way they do it, the certain top percentage gets to place, and it's different for different events. You might have 13 kids who place, and one event they had one who placed. So with my son, he was like, you know, man, you know, I really thought I had it this time. But I said, listen to what you're saying, because when you first started this, you're like, yeah, I stunk. I got last place. You know, like, he was like, this was terrible. But it was his very first time. Mm-hmm. And I said, you've grown. Look at the way that you're growing. And I said, this wasn't a waste because you didn't place.
Right.
This wasn't, I said, I even told my oldest, and he did place in one event. He didn't do it nearly as well as he wanted to in the others. And I said, but there was no waste to this.
No.
Even if you didn't place at all, you've learned from it. You've grown. And I said, in learning how to gracefully, like in the case with my middle child, I was like, did you have fun? Did you learn? Did you grow? And like, so what are you going to do next time? And what we're dealing with my youngest, because he has done a few, and he gets really upset. So we're having to teach him how to regulate. We're having to teach him. This is why this is important to have this conversation.
Yep.
That I think a lot of parents feel like, well, I feel so bad, and it just hurts his feelings so much, so we're not going to do it anymore.
See, my approach would be to double down and do it more. Like, not because I want my kid to get their feelings hurt more, but that child needs to learn how to adapt. I mean, the entire concept of this episode is adaptability. That child needs to learn how to overcome that.
And it's interesting. I think we kind of hit on it a little earlier on in our conversation, because we don't teach children how to overcome when they're children. It doesn't just like all of a sudden they just miraculously mature and all of a sudden they're able to do it as adults. A lot of times you just go through life, and you might have a job, you might, you know, but you're never living up to your potential. You're just, all the things that are difficult, that are worth the endeavor to try to overcome, you just skirt away, and you keep them at arm's length your entire life. You're just so much wasted potential in your life because you're unwilling to overcome, because anything that's worthwhile tends to be pretty difficult. Like, if you want to learn an instrument, you just can't just pick it up and play it. I mean, unless you're just some sort of like gifted person that can do that, but it takes work and it takes effort. But once you're able to overcome the difficulty of learning and getting your muscle memory in your fingers and whatever, you've now are able to enjoy this thing. Like,
I'm just going to reiterate this. I mean, it says, you know, we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character. And character produces hope, and hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. So I want to read it again. I mean, I've read it once, but Romans 5, 3 through 5. If a parent feels a certain kind of way about I don't want my child's feelings to be hurt.
Mm-hmm.
If they can lean on this scripture and understand that, look,
Mhm.
this suffering will produce endurance in this child, which is, building their character, not to the point, like, I don't remember what you said, throw them to the wolves. It's not to the point where you're purposely trying to beat them down or make them feel
Mhm.
bad, but it's that you're allowing them to have pursuits and grow and improve naturally.
Mhm.
And like your middle son, where
Mhm.
he's truly improving because he wants to do better.
And I think it's worth another concrete illustration. So one more adultish, because again, once we get into life, it's not just like tournaments, and it's no longer just learning musical
Right.
instruments. We've done that. Like, it's some very real things. And when I first went into parachurch ministry, and we struggled really hard at the beginning, and it was sort of, I was hitting setback after setback, and it's like, okay, Lord, what are you doing? And there was nights where, again, we didn't know how we would make it through the month, kind of thing, and having to endure this. And I remember there were some nights, and I would just get, just really upset, and I would talk to my wife, and she would, this is why having a spouse who's on board when you're in ministry, she was like, this is what God has called us to. We
Yep.
know. And she would affirm,
Right,
and she
yeah.
affirmed. So this happened a couple of different times. And I distinctly remember one time I was having my little moment again and just upset. And I go to her, and it was just at night, and she was already in bed, and she rolled over, she looked at me, and she basically said, put your big kid pants on and deal with it. And she rolled back over, and I was like, but see, what happened was
All right.
she was there for me, and she wasn't not being there for me then, but
No,
it was
no,
what I
it's-
needed.
Yeah.
It was we moved into it. She has affirmed, and then she just like told me the
Time to
truth
go, yeah.
that I needed to hear, and I did not have that kind of meltdown again. And again, this is as an adult. And so with our kids, this is why, as we're teaching them in these areas, sometimes we know it's okay. And then to have the wisdom as a parent to know when to say, it's time to suck it up, buttercup, and
Mhm.
get it done. I think that's the hard part for parents is that if you weren't raised that way, if you weren't shown that,
Right. Yeah.
you're having to figure that out as you go.
That makes sense.
And I think that's the encouragement I want to offer parents is get the feel for that. Like, be willing to recognize, all right, I need to balance mercy and firmness. I need to balance compassion, but also the assertiveness that my child needs to go and do this and
Yeah.
get back in there. And it's not a formula. And I think that's the other thing that comes out so many times with some of the various products that people try to sell us, is they offer a formula.
Right.
Like, there's no formula. Kids are different, the situations are different, and you need to learn how to navigate that and get the feel for it. But I think I want to also reiterate that as parents, when we really love our children, even if our scales are tipped one way too far, there's a sense the child knows that.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think, goes so far when we express that love, that even when we don't express the other things correctly, that love sort of covers a multitude of sins,
Mhm.
even our own.
I think parents are going to hear this, and I think we've got it right. So children, we need to let them fail. We need to correct them. We need to balance it. But I think kind of the problem is going to be is that most parents don't know what this is like
Mhm.
themselves.
Mhm.
So some parents will come across far too harsh
Mhm.
and far too crushing on that child.
Mhm.
Other parents are exactly the opposite, where they don't do it at all. And so I think one of the ways that a parent can learn this is if they seek this out in their own lives. If they actually, take a risk, or they ask for feedback. I mean, one of the examples is when I came to Cape Fear and was the pastor. I mean, preaching is absolutely not my, it wasn't a skill set, right? And so I asked you, after every single sermon, you would take notes throughout the sermon. And I said, I want constructive feedback, like legitimate, truthful, harsh, if necessary, feedback every single week. And we sat down every week for
Months,
maybe a year.
maybe.
I mean, I probably got pictures of every one of those sets of sermons, right?
Mhm.
And none of that was fun for me. Like, I don't sit there and go, "Ooh, I'm really looking forward to the meeting with Thomas where he destroys my sermon and tells me all of the ways I could do better and all the ways that I was terrible." Like, it was not fun.
But I think I always start it with, here's what you did well.
No, sure.
Here's what
Sure.
we're doing good.
And that's
But
what I was going to say, is that you were truthful in it wasn't like just the compliment sandwich. It was like you really did, like, these are the things you did well, but here are all the ways in which you can improve. Now, I don't think you should go at a kid quite how you went at me, because I'm a grown man, but I think it was a very strong feedback loop for me, and allowed me to improve on my preaching, allowed me to improve on pastoring, allowed me to improve across the board. So as a parent, if this is something that's foreign to you, you can seek it out. I mean, iron sharpens iron. Like, this is a way which you can look at somebody that you trust and say, look, I need feedback. And then don't get mad and defensive when said feedback comes in, because it's hard. I mean, it's tough.
I think that's the natural reaction, that once we're getting that feedback, we start making that, maybe not make excuses might be the right word, but we try to justify.
Just find reason our way through it.
Yeah, well, I did that because, and save face, I think is sometimes what we try to do. And I think that's why, if we can learn to handle those kinds of things and those criticisms and the failures, there is an element too, our kids see that. Like, when we have those moments, when we have those failures, when we're making something and we break it while we're making it, how are we going to respond, And it goes back to virtue is caught. They have to see that. And in this way, I think where parents, I think we forget, like, we're not the experts, and we are still growing, and there's a chance to grow with our children. We can grow, we should be growing in areas that are far more adultish than what the kids are.
Right.
But they can see that. They can draw the analogy. They can draw the connection. And then we have our own lives to speak to, because I think I've done that several times with my sons, being able to point out, here's where I failed, here's where I did this, and and they receive that. I think they're surprised sometimes when they hear some of the ways I've failed, and I don't want them. It's really nice when, like, your kid looks at you and just thinks you're the best person in the world, and really you're not. But if they have an honest view of you and a genuine view, I think it takes pressure off the parents.
It does.
You don't have to pretend you're perfect, because you're not. But your kids have an honest sense of who you are and who you're growing into. Yeah. And that's what you're trying to lead them in.
Yeah, I mean, if you can show adaptability to your children, then you can create adaptable children. But if you are the person that's never wrong, if you're the person that knows everything, if you're the person that can't take criticism, can't fail, won't take a risk, if you are that person, that is what you're going to create. And these, I mean, they're going to be so fragile that as soon as the first time they even receive just the minor crack, they're just going to shatter on the ground and not be able to handle it. Yeah. I was like, that was good. That was good stuff there.
Yeah.
No, that's good. And you made that good point, because I think, and it's maybe good to finish with that, because I know several people who have either parents or who were the kind of people who were never wrong. And again, that sense of I will not fail, and how I can even think of some of my professors I've had who I very much respect them, who accomplished so much, but they never would admit when they're wrong.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's why this whole idea, you've got to learn how to handle those kinds of things. And it's really an odd thing to think, the gift that we give our children of teaching them how to fail. Like, we want to succeed, but I think that's the path. I think that's what we are as humans.
Important. Yeah. All right, gentlemen. Well, I appreciate the conversation as always. You can find us on familiesofvirtue.com and our podcast, Virtuous Roots, on all major streaming platforms. Be blessed, and we will talk to you next time.